The rain had stopped, but the air still clung to the scent of wet earth and regret. Ezra Cole stood at the edge of the cemetery, his boots sinking slightly into the mud, watching strangers mourn a man he'd never met. Why he was here, he couldn't quite say, only that something in the obituary's stark lines had pulled him like a tide. Greenwood, Ohio, was a town that held its secrets close. And Ezra, at 25, was no stranger to its whispers. He'd grown up on its fringes, the kid with the thrift store jacket and a heart too big for his own good. His life was a patchwork of odd jobs: barista, delivery driver, occasional mechanic, each one a stepping stone to nowhere. But the obituary in the Greenwood Gazette had stopped him cold. Jonathan Harrow, 52, beloved teacher, passed quietly. No surviving family. Service at St. Mary's Cemetery. Something about the word quietly had lodged in Ezra's chest, a splinter of loneliness he recognized too well. He adjusted his jacket, the leather creaking, and scanned the crowd. Most were older, their faces creased with the kind of grief that comes from years of knowing someone. A woman in a black shawl dabbed her eyes. A man in a tweed coat stood stiffly, clutching a worn book. Ezra felt like an intruder, yet his feet wouldn't move. The priest's voice droned, words about eternal rest. But Ezra's gaze caught on a man standing apart from the rest. Tall, silver streaking his dark hair. He wore a suit that looked too expensive for this town. His eyes, fixed on the casket, burned with something Ezra couldn't name: anger, maybe, or love gone sour. The service ended, and the crowd began to disperse, their footsteps muffled by the damp grass. Ezra lingered, unsure why, until a woman in a crisp blazer approached him. "You're Ezra Cole?" she asked, her voice clipped but kind. He nodded, startled. "Yeah. How'd you? I'm Clara Nguyen, Mr. Harrow's attorney." She held out a card, her eyes assessing him. "He left instructions. You're named in his will." Ezra's breath caught. "There's got to be a mistake. I didn't know him." Clara's lips pressed into a thin line. "No mistake. The reading's tomorrow, 10 a.m. at my office. You'll want to be there." She turned away before he could argue, leaving him staring at the card, her name embossed in gold. The cemetery was nearly empty now, save for the man in the suit, who hadn't moved. Ezra's curiosity tugged him closer, his boots crunching on gravel. "Hey," he called softly, not wanting to startle him. "You okay?" The man turned, his face sharp and weary, like a blade worn down by time. "Do I look okay?" His voice was low, almost a growl, but his eyes softened when they met Ezra's. "You're not from his school, are you?" "No," Ezra said, shoving his hands in his pockets. "I just saw the obituary. Felt like I should come." The man studied him, then gave a bitter laugh. Jonathan always did draw strays. He walked off without another word, leaving Ezra with a knot in his stomach and a question he couldn't shake. Who was Jonathan Harrow to him? That night, Ezra couldn't sleep. His tiny apartment, with its peeling wallpaper and thrift store furniture, felt smaller than ever. He sat on the edge of his bed, the attorney's card in his hand, turning it over like it might reveal answers. Jonathan Harrow. The name meant nothing, yet it felt heavy, like a stone dropped into still water. He pulled up his laptop, searching for anything social media, old articles, anything to explain why a stranger's death had upended his world. Harrow had been a history teacher at Greenwood High, beloved for his passion and quiet humor. No mention of a partner, no family. A few grainy photos showed a man with kind eyes and a crooked smile, standing in front of a chalkboard or holding a book at a community event. Ezra's heart ached at the sight, though he didn't know why. He found a blog post from a former student, describing Harrow as the teacher who saw you when no one else did. Ezra closed the laptop, his throat tight. He'd spent his life feeling invisible. Maybe that's why he was here. The next morning, Clara's office smelled of coffee and old books. Ezra sat across from her, feeling out of place in his faded jeans among the polished wood and leather. The man from the cemetery was there too, introduced as Marcus Vale, Jonathan's colleague. His suit was just as sharp, but his eyes were red-rimmed, like he hadn't slept either. Clara cleared her throat, sliding a folder across the desk. Jonathan's will is unconventional. He left everything his house, savings, personal effects, though, my love. She paused, her gaze flicking between them. He named you Ezra. Ezra's heart stopped. What? That's There's no way. I didn't even know him. Marcus leaned forward, his voice sharp. This is a mistake. Jonathan and I. He stopped, his jaw tight, and Ezra caught the flash of pain in his eyes. He would have told me. Clara raised a hand. I understand this is shocking. But Jonathan was clear. Ezra, he left a letter for you. It's in the house, along with the keys. She slid an envelope toward him, her expression unreadable. Ezra's hands shook as he took it. Marcus stood abruptly, his chair scraping. This is wrong, he muttered, storming out. Ezra wanted to call after him, to explain he was just as lost. But the words wouldn't come. The house was on Maple Street, a modest Victorian with ivy climbing its walls. Inside, it smelled of cedar and old paper, every corner filled with books and photographs. Ezra wandered, overwhelmed, until he found the letter on a desk in the study. His name was scrawled on the envelope in neat, slanting handwriting. He tore it open, his pulse racing. Ezra, you don't know me, but I've known you for years. Your mother was my student, my friend. When she died, I promised to watch over you. I failed her, but I won't fail you now. This house, my life's work, it's yours. Find the truth in these walls. You're not as alone as you think. Jonathan. Ezra's knees buckled. His mother, gone when he was 10, had never mentioned a teacher named Jonathan. Yet here was her name, her memory, woven into a stranger's will. He sank into a chair, the letter trembling in his hands, and felt the weight of a life he'd never known pressing down on him. Ezra sat in the study, the letter still clutched in his hand, its words looping through his mind like a song he couldn't unhear. His mother, Anna, had been a ghost in his life, her laughter a faint echo, her face blurred by time. That Jonathan Harrow had known her, had cared enough to make a promise, felt like a betrayal and a gift all at once. The house creaked around him, as if it, too, held memories it wanted to share. Shelves overflowed with history books, their spines cracked from use, and a corkboard above the desk was pinned with photos and notes. One picture caught his eye, a young woman with Ezra's dark eyes, laughing in a park, a man beside her with Jonathan's crooked smile. Ezra's chest tightened. Was this his mother? Was this Jonathan? He pulled the photo down, tracing the edges, searching for answers in the faded colors. A knock at the door jolted him. He shoved the photo in his pocket and opened the door to find Marcus Vale, his face a storm of emotions. I need to know why, Marcus said, his voice raw. Why you? Why not me? Ezra stepped back, gesturing him inside. I don't know, man. I'm as confused as you are. He held up the letter, hesitant. He mentioned my mom. Said he made a promise to her. Marcus's eyes narrowed, but he took the letter, scanning it quickly. His shoulders slumped, and for a moment, he looked smaller, less like the polished man from the cemetery. Anna, he murmured. He talked about her sometimes. Said she was special. You knew him well? Ezra asked, his voice soft, afraid to break whatever fragile truce they'd stumbled into. Marcus nodded, sinking into a chair. 20 years. We taught together at Greenwood High. history, and literature. He paused, swallowing hard. He was my best friend. Maybe more. Once. But he never said anything about you. Ezra felt a pang of guilt, though he wasn't sure why. I didn't ask for this. I didn't even know he existed until yesterday. Marcus's gaze flicked to the photo in Ezra's hand. That's them, isn't it? Jonathan and Anna. Ezra nodded, passing it over. Marcus stared at it, his fingers tightening. He kept this all these years. Never told me. His voice cracked, and Ezra saw the weight of unspoken love in his eyes. They sat in silence, the house breathing around them. Finally, Ezra spoke. What was he like? Jonathan. Marcus's lips curved, a ghost of a smile. Stubborn. Brilliant. He'd spend hours talking about the Civil War or some obscure poet, then sneak you a coffee when you were drowning in grading. He saw people really saw them. Kids, colleagues, even the janitor. Everyone but himself. Ezra leaned forward, hungry for more. Why'd he leave me everything? If you were so close. I don't know. Marcus's voice was sharp, but his eyes were distant. He shut me out the last few years. Said he was protecting me. From what? I never figured out. The conversation faltered, and Marcus stood to leave. At the door, he turned. If you find answers in this house, tell me. I deserve that much. Ezra nodded, and Marcus was gone, leaving a hollow ache in the room. Alone again, Ezra began to explore. The house was a maze of memories, letters tucked in books. A journal filled with Jonathan's tight handwriting. Sketches of places Ezra didn't recognize. In the attic, he found a box labeled Anna. Inside were her things, a scarf that still smelled faintly of lavender, a high school yearbook, a stack of letters tied with twine. His hands shook as he opened one, her familiar script spilling across the page. Jonathan, I'm scared. Not for me, but for Ezra. If I don't make it, promise you'll look out for him. He's got your heart. You know, too big, too kind. Don't let him lose it. Ezra's vision blurred. He didn't remember his mother being sick, only the suddenness of her absence. Cancer, the social worker had said, but the details were a fog. Had Jonathan been there, in the shadows of his childhood, keeping a promise Ezra never knew? He spent hours reading, piecing together fragments. Anna had been Jonathan's student in the late 90s. A bright, rebellious girl who loved poetry and history. Their friendship had outlasted her graduation, a bond forged in late-night talks and shared dreams. But there was no mention of romance, only a fierce, platonic love. So why my love in the will? The next day, Ezra returned to Clara's office, the letters in his bag. Did Jonathan ever talk about my mom? He asked, his voice steadier than he felt. Clara hesitated, then nodded. He mentioned her once. Said she was the reason he stayed in Greenwood. He felt responsible. For what? Ezra pressed. She sighed, choosing her words carefully. Jonathan was private, but I know he carried guilt. About Anna. About others. He didn't always think he deserved happiness. Ezra left with more questions than answers, but the letters burned in his mind. He needed to know more, not just about his mother, but about the man who'd tied their lives together across decades. Ezra's days began to blur, each one spent in Jonathan's house, sifting through the relics of a life that felt both foreign and achingly familiar. The attic became his sanctuary, its dusty beams and slanted light a cocoon for his unraveling thoughts. He found more letters, some from his mother, others from students and friends, each one painting a picture of a man who loved fiercely but held himself at a distance. One letter, tucked inside a poetry anthology, stopped him cold. It was from Jonathan to Anna, dated a year before Ezra was born. Anna, you're braver than I'll ever be. Leaving this town, Chasing your dreams, it's what I should have done. But I'm staying. For reasons I can't explain yet. If you ever need me, I'm here. Always. Ezra traced the words, his heart pounding. Jonathan had wanted to leave Greenwood, but stayed. For Anna. For someone else. The questions gnawed at him, and he felt a pull to Marcus, the only other person who might understand. He found Marcus at the high school, grading papers in a classroom that smelled of chalk and coffee. The room was lined with posters of historical figures, a testament to Jonathan's passion. Marcus looked up, surprise flickering across his face. Ezra, what do you want? I found more letters, Ezra said, pulling out the one from Jonathan. I need to know what he was hiding. Marcus read in silence, his expression unreadable. When he finished, he set the letter down, his hands unsteady. He never told me about this, but it sounds like him always carrying the weight of the world. Did he ever talk about leaving Greenwood? Ezra asked. Marcus nodded slowly. Once. We were young, stupid in love. I wanted to move to Chicago, start over. He said he couldn't, not yet. I thought he was scared, but now, he gestured to the letter. Maybe it was her. Ezra's throat tightened. You and Jonathan, you were together. For a while. Marcus's voice was barely a whisper. In the 90s. In a town like this. It wasn't easy. We kept it quiet. Then he pulled away. Said he didn't want to hurt me. I thought he was just afraid of commitment. But maybe it was something else. Ezra sat across from him, the desk between them a fragile barrier. What if it was my mom? What if he stayed because of her? Marcus's eyes met his, searching. Then why give everything to you? Why not me? Or someone else he knew? Ezra didn't have an answer, but the question bonded them. Two men caught in the orbit of a ghost. They spent the evening talking, Marcus sharing stories of Jonathan's quirks, his love for bad puns, his habit of leaving notes in books for students to find. Ezra shared fragments of his mother, her laugh, her stubborn streak. It was the first time he'd spoken of her without pain. The next day, Ezra found a journal in Jonathan's bedroom, its pages filled with entries spanning decades. One, from 10 years ago, made his heart race. I saw Ezra today, at the diner. He's grown so much like Anna, same eyes, same fire. I want to tell him everything, but it's not time. Not yet. I owe her this much, to give him a future she couldn't have. Ezra's breath hitched. Jonathan had been watching him, not as a stranger, but as a promise kept. But why the secrecy? Why wait until death to reveal it? He called Marcus, reading the entry over the phone. There was a long silence before Marcus spoke. He was protecting you. From what? I don't know. But Jonathan never did anything without a reason. They agreed to meet at the house, combing through more boxes. In the basement, they found a locked chest, its key taped inside one of Jonathan's journals. Inside were legal documents, newspaper clippings, and a photo of Anna holding a baby Ezra. A note was pinned to it, for Ezra, when he's ready. The clippings told a story Ezra hadn't known. His mother had been an activist, fighting for gay rights in Greenwood when it was dangerous to do so. One article mentioned a protest where she'd been arrested alongside a young teacher, Jonathan. Ezra's mind reeled. Had Jonathan stayed to honor her fight? Had he loved her? Or something bigger? Marcus's voice broke the silence. He never told me about the protests. He said it was a part of his life he couldn't share. His eyes were wet, but he smiled faintly. He was always so damn noble. Ezra felt a surge of gratitude for Marcus, for his willingness to peel back the layers of Jonathan's life with him. They were strangers, yet bound by this mystery, by a man who'd loved them both in his own quiet way. The chest's contents spilled across the basement floor, a mosaic of a life Ezra was only beginning to understand. The newspaper clippings painted his mother as a firebrand, a young woman who'd stood up in a town that preferred silence. Jonathan's name appeared in a few, always in the background, a quiet supporter of her cause. Ezra traced a photo of them at a rally, their faces alight with defiance. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was chasing a ghost who'd left him a map. Marcus sat cross-legged beside him, reading a letter from Anna to Jonathan, dated a month before her death. "You're the only one I trust with him. If I'm gone, don't let Ezra forget who he is." Marcus's voice broke as he read, and Ezra saw the weight of years in his eyes, years of loving someone who kept secrets. "Why didn't he tell you?" Ezra asked, his voice soft. "You were his everything, right?" Marcus laughed, bitter and sad. "I thought so. But Jonathan had a way of carrying burdens alone. He said it was easier that way." He handed Ezra the letter. "Your mom trusted him. That's why he stayed. Why he watched you. But why the will? Why my love?" Ezra's mind churned. The phrase felt like a riddle, a key to something bigger. He thought of the house, its walls heavy with memory. Maybe there's more here. Something we haven't found. They searched until midnight, pulling books from shelves, checking drawers, even tapping walls for hidden compartments. In the study, Ezra found a false panel behind a bookcase, revealing a small safe. The key from the chest fit perfectly. Inside was a single envelope, sealed, with Ezra's name in Jonathan's handwriting. Ezra's hands trembled as he opened it. The letter was short, but each word hit like a stone. "Ezra, I loved your mother like a sister. When she died, I swore to protect you, but I couldn't do it openly. Greenwood isn't kind to people like me, like us. You're my love because you're her legacy, and because I see myself in you. The house is yours, but so is the truth. Find the box under the floorboards in my room. It's time you knew." Ezra's breath caught. "People like us." The words echoed, stirring something deep, something he'd buried under years of survival. He'd never spoken aloud his own truth, the quiet ache of loving men in a town that didn't always understand. Had Jonathan seen it? Had he known? Marcus watched him, his expression unreadable. "What does it mean? People like us?" Ezra hesitated, then met his eyes. "I think he was talking about being gay, about living with that in a place like this." Marcus's face softened, and for the first time, Ezra saw vulnerability there. "He never told me he was out to anyone, not even Anna. But he saw you, Ezra. He saw you." They found the box under the floorboards in Jonathan's bedroom, a small wooden case with a carved lid. Inside were more letters, photos, and a journal from the early 2000s. The journal chronicled Jonathan's life after Anna's death, his grief, his fear, his quiet love for Marcus. One entry stood out. "I told Marcus I couldn't be with him. Not because I don't love him, but because I'm afraid. Anna's gone, and Ezra's alone. If I'm too open, if this town turns on me, who will keep my promise to her?" Ezra's heart broke for Jonathan, for the weight of a promise that had shaped his life. He handed the journal to Marcus, who read in silence, tears streaming down his face. "He loved me," Marcus whispered. "All this time, he loved me." Ezra reached out, his hand resting on Marcus's shoulder. "He loved us both, in his way." They sat there, surrounded by the ghosts of Jonathan and Anna, two men bound by a shared loss. Ezra felt something shift inside him, a sense of belonging he'd never known. The house wasn't just a gift. It was a bridge to a past he could finally claim. The next morning, Ezra and Marcus met at a diner, the air thick with the smell of bacon and coffee. They talked for hours, piecing together the puzzle of Jonathan's life. Marcus shared more memories, nights spent grading papers together, stolen glances in the school hallway. Ezra shared his own struggles, the loneliness of growing up different in Greenwood, The fear of being seen. You ever think about leaving? Marcus asked, his voice quiet. Ezra nodded. All the time. But now, I don't know. This house. This story, it feels like a reason to stay. Marcus smiled. A real one this time. Jonathan would have liked that. He always said you were stubborn. Like Anna. Ezra laughed, the sound lighter than he'd felt in years. For the first time, he didn't feel like a stray, drifting through life. He felt anchored, tied to a legacy of love and sacrifice. The days that followed were a whirlwind of discovery and connection. Ezra and Marcus became an unlikely team, sorting through Jonathan's belongings, each item a thread in the tapestry of his life. The house felt less like a museum and more like a home, its walls echoing with the laughter and pain of those who'd lived there. Ezra began to see himself in Jonathan not just in their shared secrets, but in their quiet determination to do right by those they loved. One evening, as they sorted through a box of old records, Marcus found a cassette labeled for Anna. They played it on an ancient stereo, the crackle of the tape giving way to Jonathan's voice, soft and warm, reading poetry. Ezra recognized his mother's favorite, Whitman's Song of Myself, and felt her presence in the room, as if she were sitting beside them. Marcus's eyes were distant, lost in memory, and Ezra wondered how many nights Jonathan had played this for himself, keeping Anna alive. He never let her go, Marcus said, his voice thick. And he never let you go, either. Ezra nodded, his throat tight. I wish I'd known him. Just once. Marcus reached for his hand, a fleeting touch that carried years of understanding. He knew you. That's what matters. Their search led them to the local library, where Jonathan had spent countless hours. The librarian, an older woman named Ruth, remembered him fondly. He was always here, digging through archives or helping kids with their projects. She said, her eyes crinkling. He left something for you. Ezra. Said you'd come looking one day. She handed him a sealed envelope, his name written in Jonathan's familiar script. Inside was a single sheet, a list of names and addresses former students, friends, people Jonathan had helped. At the bottom, a note, Ezra. These are your family now. Build what we couldn't. Ezra's heart swelled. Jonathan hadn't just left him a house. He'd left him a community, a legacy of kindness. He showed the list to Marcus, who recognized many of the names. He was always collecting strays, Marcus said with a laugh. Guess you're his last one. They began reaching out, meeting people whose lives Jonathan had touched. There was Lila, a former student who'd become a nurse thanks to Jonathan's encouragement. Tom, a mechanic who'd learned to read poetry because of him. Sarah, a single mother who said Jonathan had paid her rent when she was on the brink. Each story added weight to Ezra's inheritance, a reminder that love could ripple outward, even in silence. But the more Ezra learned, the more he felt the shadow of Greenwood's past. The town had changed since his mother's protests. But not enough. He saw it in the sidelong glances at the diner, the whispers when he and Marcus walked together. He wondered how Jonathan had survived it, loving Marcus in secret, carrying Anna's memory alone. One night, Ezra found a photo album in the attic, its pages filled with images of Jonathan and Marcus in their youth laughing at a county fair, sitting on a porch swing, their hands brushing but never quite touching. Ezra brought it to Marcus, who stared at the photos like they were a lifeline. We were so young, Marcus said, his voice soft. I thought we had forever. Ezra sat beside him, their shoulders touching. You still have something. This house. These memory assets, not nothing. Marcus nodded, his eyes wet. And you. He gave me you. The words hung between them, heavy with possibility. Ezra felt a spark, not just of connection, but of something deeper, something he wasn't ready to name. He'd spent so long running from himself, from the fear of being seen. But in Marcus's gaze, He felt safe. They began to plan, not just for the house, but for what it could become. Ezra envisioned a community center, a place for Greenwood's misfits and dreamers, a tribute to Jonathan and Anna. Marcus was hesitant at first, wary of the town's judgment, but Ezra's passion was infectious. "We can do this," Ezra said, his voice firm. "For them. For us." Marcus smiled, a flicker of the man he'd been with Jonathan. "You sound like him. You know. Stubborn as hell." Ezra laughed, and for the first time, he felt like he belonged not just to the house, but to the life he was building. The future was uncertain, but it was his to shape, a canvas painted with the colors of love and loss. The idea of the community center took root, growing with every conversation Ezra and Marcus had. They spent evenings sketching plans on napkins, dreaming of a space where kids like Ezra could feel seen, where people like Jonathan could love openly. The house, with its creaking floors and ivy-covered walls, seemed to hum with approval, as if Jonathan's spirit lingered, cheering them on. But Greenwood wasn't ready to embrace their vision. At a town hall meeting, Ezra presented their plan, his voice steady despite the knot in his stomach. The room was packed, faces ranging from curious to hostile. An older man in a flannel shirt stood, his voice sharp. "This town doesn't need a place for that kind of thing." Jonathan was a good man. But this... Ezra's hands clenched, but Marcus stepped forward, his presence commanding. Jonathan spent his life helping this town. He saw the best in it, even when it didn't deserve it. This center isn't just for you, it's for everyone who's ever felt left out. The room fell silent, but the tension lingered. Later, at the diner, Ezra overheard whispers, words like outsiders and trouble. He felt the old fear creep in, the one that had kept him quiet for years. But Marcus's hand on his arm grounded him. "They'll come around," Marcus said. "Or they won't. But we're doing this anyway." Ezra nodded, drawing strength from Marcus's resolve. They began renovating the house, funded by Jonathan's savings. Volunteers came: Lila, Tom, Sarah, and others from Jonathan's list. They painted walls, fixed leaks, and turned the study into a library, its shelves filled with Jonathan's books. Ezra felt his mother's presence in every brushstroke, her fire driving him forward. One night, as they worked late, Marcus opened up about his past with Jonathan. "We almost left. You know, in '98, we had a plan: Chicago, a new life. But Anna got sick, and Jonathan couldn't leave her. I stayed because I loved him, but I resented it sometimes. I thought he chose her over me." Ezra listened, his heart aching. He didn't choose. He was trying to do right by everyone. Marcus nodded, his eyes distant. "I know that now. But it hurt, loving someone who kept so much hidden." Ezra reached for his hand, their fingers intertwining. "You don't have to hide anymore. Not with me." The moment stretched, charged with unspoken promises. Ezra felt the pull of something new, a connection that went beyond shared grief. Marcus's smile was tentative, but real, and Ezra knew they were building more than a center, they were building a future. The work continued, but so did the pushback. Someone spray-painted slurs on the house's front door, and Ezra's anger flared, hot and sharp. Marcus calmed him, his voice steady. This is what Jonathan faced. It's why he stayed quiet. But we're not him. We can fight. They reported the vandalism, and to Ezra's surprise, the community rallied. Ruth, the librarian, organized a cleanup, and dozens showed up, scrubbing paint and planting flowers. Lila brought her hospital colleagues, who shared stories of Jonathan's kindness. Tom fixed the door, his hands steady despite the tremor of age. Ezra watched, overwhelmed, as the house transformed into a beacon of hope. By spring, the center was nearly ready. They named it Haven, a nod to Jonathan's belief in second chances. Ezra and Marcus hung a sign above the door, their hands brushing as they worked. The air was warm, alive with possibility, and Ezra felt a spark of joy he hadn't known was possible. At the opening, the crowd was small but earnest. Sarah spoke, her voice trembling, about how Jonathan had saved her family. Lila read a poem she'd written, inspired by his lessons. Marcus stood beside Ezra, his presence a quiet strength. When it was Ezra's turn to speak, he looked out at the faces, some familiar, some new, and felt his mother's fire in his chest. "This place is for everyone who's ever felt alone," he said. "Jonathan gave me a home, and now I'm giving it back to you." The applause was soft but real, and Ezra felt Marcus's hand on his shoulder, a silent promise. They were carrying Jonathan's legacy forward. Together, Haven opened its doors, and Greenwood began to change, slowly but surely. Kids came after school, drawn by the free books and quiet corners. Adults lingered, sharing stories over coffee, finding solace in a place that didn't judge. Ezra and Marcus worked side by side, their bond deepening with every shared laugh, every late-night plan. The house, once a mausoleum of secrets, was alive with voices, a testament to Jonathan's love. But Ezra couldn't shake the weight of the will's words, "To my love." He'd found the truth about his mother, about Jonathan's promise, but the phrase still felt like a puzzle with a missing piece. One evening, as he and Marcus sorted donations, Ezra found a final letter, tucked inside a book of Whitman's poetry. "Ezra, if you're reading this, you found Haven. I called you my love because you're the son I never had, the piece of Anna I could keep. I loved Marcus, too, but I was too afraid to live it fully. Don't make my mistake. Love bravely. Ezra, you're stronger than I ever was." Ezra's eyes burned as he handed the letter to Marcus, who read it in silence, tears falling freely. "He wanted us to be free," Marcus said, his voice breaking. "All this time, he was setting us free." Ezra nodded, his heart full. He thought of his mother, of Jonathan, of the sacrifices that had brought him here. He looked at Marcus, at the lines of grief and hope etched into his face, and felt a certainty he'd never known. "I'm not afraid," he said, his voice steady. "Not anymore." Marcus smiled, and in that moment, Ezra knew they were more than partners in grief. They were building a life, one Jonathan had dreamed of but never dared to live. Ezra reached for Marcus's hand, and this time, neither pulled away. The center thrived, a beacon for Greenwood's lost and lonely. Ezra and Marcus became its heart, their love a quiet rebellion against the town's old fears. They held poetry readings, history talks, and support groups, each event a step toward healing. The vandalism stopped, replaced by donations and volunteers. Ruth brought her book club. Tom taught kids to fix bikes. Sarah's daughter, now a teenager, painted a mural on the wall, a vibrant tribute to Anna and Jonathan, their faces smiling down. 1 year after the funeral, Ezra stood in the cemetery, the air crisp with autumn. He placed lilies on Jonathan's grave, their petals bright against the stone. Marcus stood beside him, their shoulders brushing. "He'd be proud," Marcus said, his voice soft. Ezra nodded, his throat tight. "He gave me everything. Not just the house, but us." Marcus's hand found his, their fingers lacing together. "Yeah, he did." They walked back to Haven, the town quiet around them. The house glowed in the dusk, its windows warm with light. Ezra felt his mother's fire, Jonathan's love, and Marcus's strength, all woven into the life he'd claimed. He wasn't astray anymore. He was home. And as they stepped inside, the sound of laughter greeted them, kids reading, adults talking, a community alive with possibility. Ezra looked at Marcus, saw the future in his eyes, and knew they'd keep Jonathan's promise. Not just to Anna, but to themselves. Love bravely, he'd said. And they would. Every day. For as long as they had.